Proposal failed, but the K-car drivers say they're still fighting.
In February, we told you state lawmakers were considering a proposal to legalize miniature K-cars.
Across 12 states, a silent war is being waged, not with weapons, but with regulations, policy memos, and courtroom whispers. And at the heart of it all, a tiny Japanese truck. To most people, these miniature vehicles look like toy boxes on wheels, quirky, harmless, even charming. But to lobbyists, regulators, and automotive giants, there's something far more dangerous, a threat to profit margins, a threat to bureaucratic control, a threat to the status quo of American transportation. Real quick, if you're into videos that cut through the noise and break things down clearly, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps more people find this. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Also, drop a comment and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your take. Now onto the video. We're talking about K-trucks, a class of ultra-compact Japanese vehicles that cost less than a year's payment on a new Ford F-150, sip fuel rather than guzzle it, and sneak through narrow streets with a level of ease no full-size pickup can match. But now, lawmakers across the country are banning them, stripping their plates, and declaring them unsafe. The question is, why now? And more importantly, who's behind it? Because as it turns out, this crackdown isn't just about safety, it's about control. And at the center of it all is a shadowy organization you've probably never heard of, but that might be deciding what you can and can't drive. This is the story of how a forgotten import loophole turned into a nationwide rebellion. It's the story of small-town mail carriers, baristas, and farmers banding together to resist a growing wave of bureaucratic overreach. And it's the story of how the future of transportation in America is being shaped, not by innovation or need, but by fear. And by the end, we'll expose the single manufacturer quietly pulling the strings to keep these efficient machines off U.S. streets for good. In the world of American trucks, bigger has always meant better. The Ford F-150, Ram 1500, and Chevy Silverado have long dominated roads, construction sites, and suburban driveways, not just as tools, but as symbols of power, utility, and success. But in recent years, something unexpected began creeping into that landscape. Quietly, without marketing campaigns or dealership rollouts, a new kind of truck began appearing, the Japanese K-truck. Measuring barely 11 feet long and weighing in at around 500 pounds, these trucks, like the Honda Acti, Suzuki Carry, and Daihatsu Hijet, were never meant to conquer freeways or pull fifth wheels. They were designed for Japan's narrow alleys, rice fields, and urban deliveries. But what made them useful in Japan made them revolutionary in America. Here was a truck that cost under $10,000, could be parked almost anywhere, used a fraction of the fuel, and required minimal maintenance. For small business owners, farmers, and tradespeople, they were a dream come true. You didn't need a commercial driver's license. Insurance was cheaper. Fuel savings were substantial. Parts were simple and available. And you could buy 5 K-trucks for the price of one brand new Ford pickup. By 2023, over 17,500 K-trucks had been imported into the U.S., joining an estimated 45,000 other low-speed vehicles already in use. It wasn't just a trend, it was becoming a movement. But as their popularity grew, so did the backlash. These weren't just charming novelties anymore. They were an economic threat, a cultural disruption, a new type of competition the U.S. auto industry wasn't ready for. And so, the hammer came down. One by one, states began to quietly reinterpret regulations. Plates were revoked. DMV letters went out. Entire fleets of street-legal trucks became driveway-bound paperweights overnight. But what made regulators act now? And why were K-trucks, after years of peaceful use, suddenly being declared unsafe? The answer begins in an unlikely place. A law from 1988 that was never supposed to help foreign vehicles, but ended up creating the most powerful loophole in American automotive history. And that loophole was about to blow wide open. In 1988, Congress passed the Imported Vehicle Safety Compliance Act, a sweeping piece of legislation that effectively locked foreign vehicles out of the U.S. market. The law was built on a simple principle. Any car or truck imported into America had to meet federal motor vehicle safety standards, a complex, expensive, and nearly impossible set of hurdles for most foreign manufacturers. The intention? Clear. Protect American automakers. Block Japanese, German, and Korean competitors. Maintain control. But buried within that wall of legal text was a tiny crack in the foundation, a single sentence that would later cause an earthquake in the automotive landscape. That sentence created what would become known as the 25-year rule. The rule was meant as a nod to collectors and vintage enthusiasts. If a vehicle was 25 years old or more, it was exempt from modern safety and emission standards. That meant you could import a 25-year-old Toyota, Nissan, or Mitsubishi, even if it never met U.S. specs. At the time, it was a minor concession. No one imagined this obscure clause would go mainstream. But then came the internet. Then came global car culture. And then came the K-truck revolution. Raymond Moy, a Japanese car enthusiast, was one of the first to see the potential. What started as a hobby, importing classic Skylines and turbocharged K sports cars, became a growing business. And it wasn't just fast cars he was bringing in, it was K-trucks, thousands of them. These trucks, once limited to Japan's farmland and construction sites, began rolling into American ports in container loads. They were small, practical, cheap, and most importantly, legal, thanks to that 25-year loophole. What the 1988 lawmakers never anticipated was how this one clause could unleash an entire ecosystem of affordable foreign vehicles into the U.S. market. Importers popped up from coast to coast. Online forums exploded with how-to guides for registering K-trucks. Farmers, tradespeople, and small business owners began quietly replacing their aging Ford Rangers and Chevy S10s with imported Japanese alternatives. By the early 2020s, it wasn't just enthusiasts taking advantage of the 25-year rule. It was practical Americans looking to save money in a time of rising costs and economic uncertainty. The loophole had morphed into a movement, and it was growing fast. But movements don't go unnoticed forever. As K-trucks spread into rural communities, urban neighborhoods, and college towns, a quiet alarm began ringing in the ears of those with something to lose. Not the average voter, not even most regulators, but the automakers. Because for every imported K-truck, that's one less $70,000 domestic pickup sold, one less overpriced repair job, one less captive customer. What began as a collector's technicality was now a backdoor pipeline that threatened a trillion-dollar transportation model, and someone was about to slam that door shut. In 2020, Alex Perkins, a shop manager at Precision Motorworks, was staring down a decision. Their aging Ford Ranger, once the reliable workhorse of the shop's daily operations, was becoming a liability. Fuel costs were climbing. Repairs were constant. Insurance premiums didn't make sense for a vehicle that could barely make it to the hardware store and back. The shop's owner, almost jokingly, suggested a replacement, a used Honda Acti, a 25-year-old Japanese K-truck they'd seen listed online. Perkins was skeptical. 6 months later, he was a convert. The little Acti proved to be everything the Ranger wasn't. Its cab-forward design provided unmatched visibility. Its abundant tie-down hooks made securing loads fast and secure. Its lightweight, just under 1,500 pounds, meant no commercial license or extra fees. But perhaps most importantly, the Acti was simple. No finicky electronics, no dealer-only service codes, just accessible mechanics anyone could learn. Perkins summed it up perfectly. When I try to park the Suburban, I ask, "Where's the anchor?" With the Acti, I park within an inch of where I want to be. That's the kind of real-world practicality that was quietly changing the way Americans thought about trucks. And Perkins wasn't alone. Across the country, stories like his were popping up. Mail carriers using K-trucks to navigate narrow back roads in Appalachia. Coffee shop owners using them for affordable deliveries in Portland. Landscapers running entire operations on fleets of 4 or 5, all purchased for less than one American pickup. It wasn't just about novelty. It was about efficiency in a world that was getting more expensive by the month. Fuel savings were measurable. Maintenance costs were a fraction. Insurance was cheaper. And unlike modern trucks bloated with technology, K trucks gave owners something rare: control. And that's exactly what made them dangerous to the system. Because if Americans realized they could do everything they needed with a $9,000 K truck instead of a $75,000 full-size pickup, what would that mean for Detroit? What would that mean for the carefully constructed market of dealer financing, extended warranties, service plans, and brand loyalty? It would mean collapse. And the auto industry knew it. So while Americans were embracing these foreign-built tools of efficiency, another machine was quietly revving up. A machine made not of metal and fuel, but of bureaucracy and policy. And at the heart of that machine was a name most Americans had never heard. In an unmarked building in Arlington, Virginia, a little-known organization began mapping the end of K trucks in America. It wasn't Congress. It wasn't a state legislature. It wasn't even the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. It was the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators, AAMVA. On paper, AAMVA is a nonprofit, a cooperative, a resource hub for DMV administrators across the US, Canada, and even the Virgin Islands. It doesn't make laws. It doesn't enforce them. But in reality, it may be one of the most powerful unelected forces in North American transportation policy. Its members include top officials from DMVs across all 50 states. They meet behind closed doors, share data, write best practices documents, and more importantly, they shape policy that gets quietly adopted by state-level departments without debate, transparency, or even public awareness. In 2021, AAMVA quietly released a document that changed everything. Its topic: imported mini trucks and safety considerations. But it wasn't just a memo. It was a playbook, a detailed guide on how to reinterpret existing state laws to classify K trucks as unsafe for road use, even if they had been previously registered legally. The language was careful, the tone was neutral, but the intent was crystal clear. Make it impossible for states to register imported K trucks without ever needing to pass a law. And it worked. By mid-2021, Maine became the first state to adopt AAMVA's recommendations. Owners received revocation letters. DMV clerks were instructed to deny renewals. No public hearings, no votes, just a new interpretation. But this was just the beginning. Rhode Island followed, then Pennsylvania, then Massachusetts. A coordinated bureaucratic blitzkrieg designed to shut the door that the 25-year loophole had opened. There were no headlines, no press releases, just confused truck owners, gutted small businesses, and thousands of suddenly illegal vehicles parked on driveways across America. The brilliance of the AAMVA model was in its plausible deniability. This isn't a ban, states said. We're just following safety recommendations. But those recommendations were coming from an unelected body, funded by public money, operating outside of public scrutiny, and with no accountability to the people affected. This wasn't policy. This was a coup, and it was only getting started. It started with silence. No press conference, no legislation, no media coverage, just a quiet update to internal documents, a change in interpretation that transformed thousands of legal vehicles into contraband overnight. In the summer of 2021, Maine became ground zero for America's war on K trucks. At the center of it all was Nikki Bachelder, the state's registration section supervisor. A career bureaucrat, Batchelder prided herself on efficiency and compliance. So when a new best practices document from the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators landed on her desk, she didn't hesitate. The memo warned of foreign vehicles slipping through the cracks, vehicles that hadn't passed U.S. crash standards, vehicles that, while once tolerated, were now seen as unsafe. Using the AAMVA memo as justification, Maine quietly redefined off-road vehicle to include anything that didn't meet federal motor vehicle safety standards. That included virtually every K truck imported under the 25-year exemption. There was no legislative vote, no executive order, just a memo, an email chain, and a sudden shift in policy. Then came the letters. Within weeks, hundreds of K truck owners across Maine received notices from the DMV. Their vehicle registrations were being revoked, not expired, revoked. Their previously street legal vehicles were now considered not fit for highway use. Their plates were void. Their trucks were grounded. For many families and businesses, the news hit like a freight train. Some had spent thousands of dollars importing K-trucks they believed were 100% legal. Others had already passed state inspections, registered the vehicles, and even insured them. Yet now, with a single bureaucratic decision, they were being told their vehicles could no longer be driven. There was no grandfather clause, no appeals process, no compensation, and perhaps the most infuriating part, the sheer hypocrisy. While K-trucks were being deregistered for safety concerns, Maine continued to allow the registration of antique vehicles, some dating back to the 1960s and 70s. These older cars and trucks often lacked seatbelts, airbags, and even basic crumple zones. In 1965 Ford F-100, rusted out and barely operational, could remain on the road. But a 1996 Mitsubishi minicab with modern brakes, seatbelts, and rollover protection was declared a threat to public safety. The contradiction was clear, and it wasn't lost on the public. Within days, affected owners began organizing. Facebook groups sprang up, filled with confused drivers, outraged business owners, and legal researchers digging through every line of Maine's motor vehicle code. Some began writing to lawmakers. Others contacted the media. A few even threatened legal action. But behind the scenes, something much bigger was happening. Maine was never meant to be the end game. It was the test case, a dry run, a blueprint for what other states could do quietly and efficiently without having to change a single law. And the results? Effective. The crackdown worked. Vehicles were deregistered. No court challenges followed. No major media blowback occurred. And most importantly, the industry took notice. If Maine could do it, so could everyone else. And they did. Rhode Island may be the smallest state in the nation, but in 2022, it played a massive role in legitimizing the war on K-trucks. Leading the charge was Walter Creddick, administrator of the state's Division of Motor Vehicles, and more crucially, a board member of the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. Creddick wasn't just following the AMVA playbook, he helped write it. When Maine's quiet crackdown proved successful, Creddick wasted no time applying the same strategy in his home state. There was no need for new laws. Rhode Island had General Law 31-35, a vague statute that allowed the DMV to deny vehicle registrations for anything deemed mechanically unfit or unsafe for highway use. That single line of legislation became the nuclear trigger. By adopting AMVA's best practices, Creddick reinterpreted existing law to declare all imported K-trucks as unsafe. It didn't matter that these vehicles had already passed federal import inspections. It didn't matter that they had been legally titled and insured. Suddenly, they were a threat, and the crackdown began. One of the first victims was Chuck Hodzinski, a longtime Rhode Island resident who owned two K-Class vehicles, a Honda Acti and a Daihatsu Mira TR-XX Avanzado. On an otherwise normal weekday, Hodzinski received two letters from the DMV. Both were identical. Both revoked his registrations, and both cited the exact same safety concern without offering any real explanation. The timing was suspicious, the language was familiar, and Hodzinski wasn't the only one. Across the state, other K-truck owners received the same sudden notices. Many were small business owners, some were daily commuters, others had simply fallen in love with the practicality and charm of their imported microtrucks. As confusion turned to outrage, patterns began to emerge. The letters used similar phrasing to those sent in Maine. The timing matched that of other states. Even the justification cited the same AMVA safety memo. This wasn't coincidence. It was coordination. By mid-2022, Pennsylvania was reporting similar issues. DMV offices began rejecting new K-truck registrations and reviewing existing ones. In Massachusetts, the Department of Transportation quietly distributed an internal memo listing every major K-truck model, all now flagged for review. It wasn't just a wave, it was a tsunami of deregistration. And as each domino fell, Affected citizens turned to the only resource they had left, each other. Social media exploded. Facebook groups ballooned with members sharing updates, legal strategies, and contact lists for DMV offices. Reddit threads turned into FOIA request hubs. Advocacy groups across multiple states began sharing the same letter templates, legal definitions, and policy rebuttals. A digital resistance was forming, not just to protect K-trucks, but to expose how unchecked regulatory power was quietly reshaping transportation rights in America. But even with mounting public pressure, one thing kept getting cited over and over again as the justification for these bans: a single crash test. A crash test so flawed, so misleading, that it became a case study in how emotion can override science. It's one of the most circulated crash videos on the internet. A tiny Japanese K-truck, the Tiger Star, drives straight into the path of a full-size Ford Ranger. The impact is violent. The K-truck crumples like a tin can, its cab folding in on itself as metal shrapnel flies. The Ranger, weighing more than double, barely flinches. To the casual viewer, the conclusion is obvious. These trucks are death traps. And for years, that's exactly how regulators framed it. The test, conducted by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, I2HS, in 2008, became the smoking gun used to support the narrative that K-trucks were unsafe for American roads. Clips were shown at committee hearings, stills were printed in DMV brochures. The footage became a tool of fear. But buried in the technical notes of the test report was a detail that changed everything. The impact wasn't fair. The Ford Ranger struck the K-truck at 35 miles per hour. The K-truck, meanwhile, entered at 25 miles per hour. The resulting impact was equivalent to a head-on collision at 60 mph, the kind of crash most vehicles, even modern SUVs, wouldn't walk away from. Worse still, the Tiger Star wasn't even a true K-truck. It was an American-assembled vehicle designed to K-class dimensions, but built with different construction methods and materials. It didn't meet Japanese safety standards. It wasn't designed for actual road use in Japan. And yet, it was held up as a representative of all K-trucks. That's like testing a plastic lawnmower and declaring all compact cars unsafe. But the damage was done. The footage had visceral power. It bypassed logic and hit people where it counted, in their fear. And fear is a potent weapon in policy. Meanwhile, other crucial facts were ignored. No crash statistics were released comparing K-trucks to U.S. domestic pickups. No consideration was given to actual use cases, like urban driving under 30 mph. No effort was made to test real Japanese imports under fair conditions. In short, the IIHS test was less about truth and more about narrative. A narrative that served the interests of those who had the most to lose from a growing K-truck movement. Because in the end, this wasn't really about protecting drivers. It was about protecting markets. But if safety was the excuse, what happens when the real killers on the road are far larger, far heavier, and completely legal? In the next section, we confront the pedestrian safety paradox, where the vehicles doing the most harm are the ones regulators refuse to touch. If the bans on K-trucks were truly about safety, then logic would demand consistency. Yet, as these tiny vehicles were being chased off American roads, a far more dangerous reality was being completely ignored: the growing threat of modern SUVs and pickup trucks to pedestrians. According to data from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, pedestrian fatalities in the U.S. rose by an alarming 46% between 2009 and 2018. And the primary culprits weren't tiny imports from Japan. They were full-size trucks and SUVs, often weighing over 7,000 pounds. These massive vehicles, with their high front ends, extended blind spots, and immense momentum, are significantly more likely to kill pedestrians on impact compared to smaller cars. In fact, a report by the Governor's Highway Safety Association in 2022 identified SUVs and trucks as the primary driver of the rise in pedestrian deaths over the last decade. So while regulators zeroed in on imported K-trucks for lacking certain crash standards, they turned a blind eye to a very real and growing threat: the vehicles already dominating American roads. It's called the pedestrian safety paradox. Smaller, lighter vehicles, like K-trucks, pose less harm to pedestrians in the event of a collision. Heavier, taller vehicles like modern pickups are far deadlier, with higher kill rates and worse visibility. The irony couldn't be more glaring. Regulators were chasing off low-speed, small-footprint K-trucks from urban areas, while simultaneously approving increasingly bloated pickup trucks that pedestrians and even small children literally could not be seen over. It gets worse. Many elementary schools across the country have issued warnings to parents who drive oversized vehicles. Some even requested that pickup driving parents use alternate drop-off zones to reduce blind spot-related accidents involving children. According to a study published in Transport Review's, truck front-end height was directly correlated with increased fatalities among pedestrians under 10 years old. So let's be clear, the vehicles regulators are trying to protect the public from high K-trucks are responsible for almost zero pedestrian fatalities in America. Meanwhile, the ones they continue to register and approve year after year are involved in thousands of deaths, especially among low-income communities and children. In fact, environmental justice advocates have raised the alarm that poor communities and communities of color are disproportionately affected by pedestrian fatalities, largely due to vehicle design trends that prioritize mass over-maneuverability. And what about crash avoidance? Modern K trucks, despite their age, were designed with excellent visibility, sharp handling, and a focus on avoiding collisions, not just surviving them. These features are standard across most Japanese imports. In contrast, many of America's top-selling trucks offer abysmally rated front visibility in safety tests. The result? Pedestrians, cyclists, and especially children are often invisible to the driver until it's too late. So the question isn't just, are K-trucks safe for drivers? The real question is, are we banning the wrong vehicles? If regulators were truly prioritizing public safety, wouldn't they be targeting 7,000-pound death machines with poor visibility and high kill rates, not 1,500-pound trucks built to navigate tight roads and school zones with precision? The answer lies not in safety data, but in something far more telling: what Japan has already proven, and what the U.S. refuses to acknowledge. While American regulators were reacting to emotional crash test footage, Japan was compiling something far more valuable: decades of real-world data. Since 1993, the Institute for Traffic Accident Research and Data Analysis, ITARDA, in Japan, has tracked comprehensive statistics on road collisions, including those involving K vehicles or K cars, the same vehicle class that includes the K trucks currently being banned in the U.S. And what did they find? After analyzing over 1,379 frontal collisions, researchers discovered that when controlling for variables like seatbelt use, airbag deployment, and crash speed, injury severity in K trucks was no worse than in standard passenger vehicles. Let that sink in. The very vehicles being branded unsafe in America have, in Japan, shown no meaningful difference in crash outcomes compared to their larger counterparts, especially in urban environments. Why the difference? It comes down to philosophy. Japan's approach to automotive safety isn't centered on crash survival. It's built on crash prevention. Rather than making vehicles heavier and bulkier to absorb impact, Japanese engineers design with visibility, handling, and predictability in mind. The goal is simple: avoid the accident altogether. This results in vehicles like K trucks that offer unmatched forward and side visibility, reducing blind spots, use tight turning radii to avoid obstacles or pedestrians, and maintain low speeds in urban zones to minimize risk. These aren't just theoretical benefits. They've contributed to Japan having one of the lowest traffic fatality rates in the developed world. And contrary to what American bans suggest, K-trucks are not primitive machines. Since 1999, Japanese K-trucks have been equipped with airbags, anti-lock brakes, electronic stability control, advanced crumple zones, seatbelt pretensioners. In other words, they're safer than most antique American vehicles still being driven daily across U.S. highways. So why isn't this data being considered? Because acknowledging Japan's safety record would undermine the very foundation of the bans. It would force regulators to admit that the crackdown isn't based on risk. It's based on something else entirely, and that something else has a name: money. Follow the money. That's where the real answers lie, because behind every letter sent, every registration revoked, and every safety concern raised, there's a clear pattern. K-trucks are bad for business, not for small businesses, not for consumers, but for the domestic auto industry and the ecosystem built around it. Let's look at the numbers. As of 2024, the average cost of a new full-size pickup truck in America surpassed $70,000. That's more than the median annual income in 15 U.S. states. Add in interest from financing, insurance premiums, and dealer markups, and many Americans are spending over $90,000 over the life of a single truck. Meanwhile, a used K truck from Japan costs between $5,000 and $10,000, requires no commercial license, has cheaper insurance, and burns a third of the fuel. This isn't just about trucks. It's about what happens when practicality threatens profit. When citizens challenge bureaucracies. When common sense collides with entrenched power. The war on K-trucks is a canary in the coal mine, a warning that transportation freedom in America is slowly being rewritten, not through laws debated in Congress, but through quiet memos, policy reinterpretations, and closed-door decisions. Today, it's K-trucks. Tomorrow, it could be any alternative that dares to offer affordability, efficiency, or independence outside the approved mold. But there's hope. From Texas to Massachusetts, from Facebook groups to state capitals, citizens are pushing back. Not with lobbyists, but with stories. Not with millions of dollars, but with sheer persistence. And in some places, it's working. Because in the end, this isn't just a question of what we drive, it's a question of who gets to decide. So now we ask you, should Americans be free to choose practical, affordable vehicles that actually serve their lives? Or will we continue down a road where only the most expensive, oversized, industry-approved options are allowed? The answer affects all of us. And it starts with awareness. Once again, thanks for watching this video. If you got something out of this, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. And hey, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Agree, disagree, or something in between. I'd love to hear it.